nongelete unda otano wonena pako yame bongo etantena na mwase munjende na timbi wala bosinga bongo nyole yobami muputinde na dibe mwe na sikwala kemu inawo
With respect to perceptions of investing in Africa, I think one of the biggest hindrances so far has been that Africa is perceived to be a country. And obviously everyone here knows that's not the case, but until we can get that out of the general public's head that Africa is not a country and that there are 53, 54 countries depending on who's counting, and all of them have very different investment environments, all of them have very different laws, different business cultures. I think until we get to that point, it'll still be hard to convince the mainstream to invest in Africa.
You know, one thing which is impressive in Cameroon is that it's just the sheer number of civil society organizations that have sprung up everywhere. They're everywhere, grassroots organizations. But what I noticed, because each time I go out of curiosity, I speak to a lot of people, is that they are not very well informed, even though this is the information age.
The power of ideas resides in the fact that on your own, you might have a certain perspective on how to solve a particular issue. But the moment your ideas are being challenged by somebody else, that somebody else might not have the right ideas, but the mere fact that he challenges you can bring out some of the shortcomings of the idea that you already have.
We aren't prepared for major commercial business, and it tends to be a detriment to investing in Africa in general. And so one of the biggest things I definitely recommend to all countries in Africa is working on the legal system to make sure that investors coming in are comfortable with local laws and do know that there's recourse in case anything happens.
I just wanted to say first, I was hoping to hear more about microfinance as it pertains to growing, grassroots movements, right? Because really, that's what's built the Indian economy, and China actually, to name a few.
But as he said, microfinance is hard. You definitely need to monitor it. And when I think of great economic strides, I don't think microfinance. I think SME. I think microfinance is great at especially bringing women out of dire poverty to that next step up. But as to whether microfinance is going to take a Central African Republic, for instance, to become a Botswana, I don't think that is the way to go. What Cameroon hasn't necessarily done and or needs to do is better publicity or branding. As far as branding, Cameroon hasn't done the strongest job. Having said that, Cameroon's biggest trading partner is France, so maybe it's just happening on the other side of the world. But with respect to the US, there just isn't that much publicity on what is going on in Cameroon.
What I knew before coming in today was corruption. It's a big hindrance, one of the biggest hindrances to the progress of Cameroon or Africa generally. I knew that before stepping in here today, and the panelists just reiterated that. Jacqueline and Mr. Mbong, they said it again. So I wanted to ask, not really to the panels or anybody in the audience, those of us attending, if we have ideas on how we could, stop or limit corruption in Cameroon. That would be productive.
Not going into politics. The question is that you have a government that is there, if it's serious about fighting corruption, when it catches anybody, it should swiftly deal with them. Once you show that example, start showing that example very swiftly. Not where you take somebody and you keep them in for 2 years and they live their life. Normally, they're supposed to be in jail, but they're living their lives normally and things like that, etc., etc. Sure, I know if you're a lawyer, you want due process. But there are times when, some mistakes will be made, but generally, people don't. I mean, I think if it was swift, that person in the office of the land's office that is saying civil parliament, would not say that, trust me.
Going through the government to get things done again would be very difficult because the system that has been put in place, it's a system that has an incentive of keeping things the way they are because they benefit the most. Again, I'm talking mostly about grassroots, about people, and we talked about remittances. The World Bank for a long time has not paid much attention to the effect of remittances, but they play a very important role because unlike aid, which goes through the government, remittances goes directly to the families, which in turn have a certain freedom in the way they invest that money.
As far as aid, I think there are countries like Rwanda. Kagame has been great at saying, look, we have needed aid, yes, we will continue to need aid, but we are going to get off aid. And Rwanda is a great example of a country that is actually making use of the aid the way it's supposed to, unlike a lot of other countries, which I think is unfortunate for many other countries.
Instead of waiting on the government to come up with jobs or to recruit to work, the money that I'm sending to, let's say, my mother or to Emmanuel, for instance, he himself can use it. She talked about driving a car. Buy a used car and start driving a car. Okay? It does not require the government to intervene. So if we develop that spirit of entrepreneur, so to speak, surely, little by little, we'll be trying to change the status quo in Cameroon.
As far as starting a business, Cameroon ranked 174th out of 183 countries. Unfortunately for Cameroon, that is a bad number. But, needless to say, there is room for improvement, which is a good thing. And I definitely think the government knows what it needs to do, and I'm sure that the government is working on that.
It's the idea of corruption. I mean, at the micro level, what we've just been saying sounds really good. Corruption at the micro level is something we all have to fight. But I think corruption at the macro level comes from abroad. And I can justify my statement. I think the fact that Texaco and Shell try to invest in the extractive industries, which you mentioned before, in Cameroon, and mount pressure on the government of Cameroon not to disclose the terms of their contract, has something to say with how transparent some of these foreign investors and some of these foreign businesses want their operations to be carried out in Africa. I think most foreign investors, and I'm not talking about the micro investors in this case, I'm not talking about the Cameroonian who wants to open a boutique in Bamenda or in Douala. I'm actually talking about the big guys. Most of them take advantage of the situation in the country to push for corruption.
With respect to foreign companies, yeah, it is a challenge I think all of Africa faces. And I've worked with one government, and they're trying to review all of their agreements right now and try to renegotiate them. In part, it just depends on the regime and what regime was there when they were being signed. It depends on what the terms were, and in a lot of cases, unfortunately, the people that are tasked with signing them just don't know what they're signing, for lack of a better word. No one really explains to them what's happening. It's, you will get X amount of money. Oh, great. And so whether or not they actually had any, malicious intentions isn't even the issue. They just really didn't understand the fact that it would mean, exclusive rights for 20 years means no one else can touch this for the next 20 years, and they just don't know.
So I think that is the issue, information and education for civil society organizations. I've seen others there who are very active. You were talking about timber, and I've seen some civil society organizations that are against any timber exploitation, but it's because they are paid by certain people, not so much because they think that they are fighting against some corruption or something like that. So there's this whole issue of information and education.
So unless we do understand that it's very important for us to work together, not only here but also back home, and most importantly, unless we decide, unless we reconquer what we've lost, and I called it our generic human identity, the power of creation, of innovation, then certainly we'll be doomed. But if each person here present decides to make its own battle, that everybody, not only in Kenya but in Africa, can have access to a good quality education, then surely the tasks that appear to be so daunting in the very beginning will be less difficult, and maybe we can succeed. Thank you.